Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, French police say none of the 150 passengers and crew on board the Germanwings plane that crashed in the French Alps survived. US President Barack Obama agrees to slow the military drawdown in Afghanistan, but stresses the goal remains the same: most US troops out by the end of 2016. Plus, Korea says it's going to invest more than $5 billion on 19 future growth engines over the next 5 years, with a special focus on the development of commercial drones. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, March 25th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning: there's shock and sadness in Europe today after a commercial airliner crashed in the French Alps. The Germanwings Airbus A320 was carrying 150 people and all are sadly presumed dead. Let's connect straight away to Eunice Kim, who's been following developments from the news centre. So, Eunice, the authorities have already ruled out the possibility that anyone survived this crash.
That's right, Mark, and a view of the crash site at the French Alps gives you a sense of the why. The plane was described as obliterated with not one intact piece of wing or fuselage, and that is presumably why the French Interior Minister came out to say early on that there was little hope that there were any survivors. Now, the Germanwings plane headed to Dusseldorf, Germany from Barcelona in Spain was carrying 150 people, most of them believed to be German. Spain's deputy prime minister said 45 had Spanish names and one Belgian is also believed to have been among those on board. 16 school children and 2 teachers from one German town were also on board on a school exchange trip. German Chancellor Angela Merkel expressed deep sorrow at the loss. She said she'll head to the crash site on Wednesday. Germanwings is the low-cost carrier to Lufthansa, Europe's largest airliner, both of which, of course, pride themselves in their good safety record. Its CEO said the last safety check on the plane was on Monday and that the pilot had 10 years of experience with the airliner and had logged 6,000 flight hours on this particular model of the Airbus A320.
Yes, and the Airbus A320 also has an exceptional safety record. We'll see what happens when the black box recordings come out. And we understand that the recovery operations have been called off for the night. It's the middle of the night in that part of the world now. But what can we expect in the investigations going forward?
Well, you could see from those videos that the terrain is rugged, steep mountainside. In fact, you can only access the crash site by helicopter. So the recovery operations is expected to take several days, especially with a snowstorm forecast to come through. A flight recorder was retrieved, which will, of course, help investigators begin their probe into what exactly caused that plane to go down. A number of strange things happened. Contrary to earlier reports, there was no distress call from the plane, and it is said to have fallen in a controlled manner some 4.2 kilometers over a period of 6 minutes. More to come, and we will follow it for you throughout the day. Other news now. Just a few hours ago, U.S. President Barack Obama held a press conference with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani following their meeting at the White House. He announced that the U.S. will keep its troop levels at the current 9,800 through the end of the year instead of the pullback that it had planned to 5,500 before. He said the move was meant to make sure that everything is done to help Afghan security forces succeed so that the U.S. does not have to return. President Ashraf Ghani thanked U.S. forces. He was elected president of the country 6 months ago.
Now, it's been nearly 5 years to the day since the South Korean warship Cheonan was carved in two by a torpedo and sank in waters near the maritime border, taking with it the lives of 46 young South Korean sailors. Once again denying it had anything to do with the sinking, North Korea on Tuesday called on the South to lift the sanctions placed on it for this sinking for the sake of better inter-Korean ties. For more on how that's very unlikely to happen, here's our Hwang Sang-hee.
North Korea says it has no apology for the sinking of South Korean warship Cheonan because it had nothing to do with it. Nonsense and never acceptable. That's what the North's National Defense Commission said on Tuesday in response to Seoul's demand for an apology as a precondition to lifting sanctions. Under the so-called May 24th measures, South Korea suspended nearly all inter-Korean economic projects following the torpedo attack 5 years ago. The Unification Ministry dismissed Pyongyang's latest statement, reiterating that the sanctions will not be lifted until North Korea takes responsibility for the attack. All this comes just 2 days ahead of the 5th anniversary of the tragedy that left 46 South Korean sailors dead. It's also an incident seen as a major turning point in inter-Korean relations. In an effort to ease tensions on the Korean peninsula, Seoul repeatedly offered to discuss the possible lifting of sanctions at the negotiating table. But with the latest turn of events, experts say North Korea seems to be seeking an upper hand in inter-Korean relations.
North Korea is sending the message that it will not beg for dialogue with the South. Rather than lifting the May 24th measures, it appears to be after the strategic goal of a shift in Seoul's North Korea policy.
With the joint U.S.-South Korea military drills ending in April, there were hopes for renewed momentum between the two Koreas. But experts say a sudden improvement seems more like wishful thinking. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, there are lingering speculation to this day that the U.S. is thinking about deploying its missile defense system known as THAAD to South Korea. The South Korea government continues to say no official discussions have been held. But this hasn't stopped more U.S. experts weighing in on the issue. They say the deployment is the minimum security, operational security strategy necessary to counter the North Korean ballistic missile threats. Our Connie Kim tells us more.
U.S. experts are throwing their support behind the possible deployment to South Korea of the American missile defense system, saying it'll make North Korea think twice before launching provocations. Van Jackson, who served as a policy advisor at the Office of the U.S. Secretary of Defense, said the potential THAAD deployment wouldn't solve all the security issues, but is a minimum required to provide protection in regards to the North's nuclear and ballistic missile threats. Speaking at a seminar in Washington hosted by Asan Institute for International Policy, Jackson said it is better to have more missile shields as long as the price is right. He added that the optimal outcome would be the integration of South Korean and U.S. systems. Daniel Chu, a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, said THAAD should give China more incentive to work with Washington on North Korea, especially if it is concerned about the implications of the system beyond countering North Korean threats. Chu also stressed that it is unproductive for China to speak of THAAD's purpose given the nature of Pyongyang's nuclear threats. China strongly opposes a possible deployment as THAAD's radar system, which can cover 2,000 kilometers, could be used to monitor parts of mainland China, including Beijing. Following high-level talks last week, a senior Chinese foreign ministry official publicly called on South Korea to consider Beijing's interests and concerns about THAAD. Seoul, however, continues to stress that there have been no official discussions with Washington on the matter. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And Russia has expressed concern about the possible deployment to South Korea of THAAD, that controversial US missile defense system, calling on Seoul to carefully assess both the positive and negative repercussions it could have. In a statement, Russia's foreign ministry said on Tuesday that the deployment of THAAD in South Korea could complicate nuclear talks with North Korea and spark an arms race in Northeast Asia. The ministry added that it cannot help but be concerned considering the destructive nature of the missile defense system's impact on international security and strategic stability. The US says THAAD will enhance Seoul's ability to deter Pyongyang's nuclear and ballistic missile threats, as well as enhancing surveillance on the north. A forest fire continues to lap away at vegetation up at the inter-Korean border. South Korean officials said on Tuesday that the blaze on both sides of the DMZ has been brought under control, but the fire actually reignited as winds picked up amid some very dry conditions in that area. Hundreds of firefighters and military personnel who were battling to contain the fire will resume efforts upon the break of dawn today, so within the next hour or so. At one point, the fire was within 5 kilometers of a border village in the south, and officials say the blaze apparently started near a North Korean guard post on Monday morning local time, but the exact cause of this fire remains unknown. A video clip posted on the website of the Japanese embassy in the US is raising some eyebrows here in Korea. In the video titled "Nation Building in the Post-War Era, Japan as a Reliable Partner," Japan lists South Korea as a country that has received aid from Japan, with funds helping to build one of Korea's biggest steel plants and also a subway line. It's the timing of the video's release that's causing the most interest, because it's about 1 month before Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe travels to Washington, and this of course has many in Korea scratching their heads. There's growing concerns in Korea that Abe will not apologize for Japan's historical wrongdoings during his visit to the US. And Korea is urging Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to show genuine remorse for Japan's historical wrongdoings if he ends up giving a planned speech to the US Congress. Seoul's foreign ministry says the Abe administration is probably aware of the attention and concerns shared by Korea, but also the international community over its understanding of history. The ministry added that should Abe address Congress, he should inherit the historical understanding of his predecessors and call on Japan to sincerely reflect upon its wartime atrocities. Abe is scheduled to make a week-long visit, as we just mentioned, to the US at the end of April. Korea's ICT and industry ministries have unveiled plans to invest more than $5 billion into new growth engines as part of the government's creative economy drive. And one up-and-coming area that's of particular interest is the commercial drone market. Our Kim Min-ji has more.
Korea wants to boost its presence in the global market for unmanned aerial vehicles. After the U.S., it was the second country to succeed in developing tilt rotors, which allows for vertical takeoffs and landings for aircraft. Even though it currently ranks 6th in the world in terms of drone technology, domestic regulations have been holding it back from gaining commercial footing, but that's about to change.
Korea's been behind because there was a lack of demand, but with the introduction of drones in the private sector, we see great potential for growth. We are coming up with new eased regulations to spur the market.
This is just one of the industries that is being eyed as a potential future cash cow. The government plans to invest over $5 billion by 2020 on 19 future growth engines, including the robot and smart car industries, as part of its creative economy drive.
We plan to increase investment for R&D, ease up regulations that are hindering growth, and create sophisticated management systems to help new tech industries become the pillars of economic revitalization.
The plan includes other burgeoning sectors like the Internet of Things and fifth-generation networks, and is expected to be finalized in April after a review by governmental bodies and experts in the private sector. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's top central banker has expressed confidence that the domestic economy is on the road to recovery despite some lingering short-term uncertainties. Lee Ju-yeol says the Bank of Korea's recent decision to slash the key interest rate to a record low can only help matters down the road. Park Geunhye reports.
Speaking with economic experts on Tuesday, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol said he expects the domestic economy to gain momentum. These comments come after the central bank cut its key rate 3 times in the last 8 months, leaving it at a historic low of 1.75%. Those cuts boosted home transactions and led to a sliding Korean won, raising the price competitiveness of local exporters in the global market. The combination of those factors, along with the government's aggressive stimulus measures and low oil prices, have created favorable economic conditions. Dubai crude prices have dropped nearly 50% from a year ago.
The fall in oil prices increases purchasing power. It also pulls down production costs for local manufacturers.
The top central banker, however, cautioned against too much optimism, saying short-term uncertainties still linger over global oil prices and the U.S. Federal Reserve policy. The governor cited Fed Chief Janet Yellen's statement that policy decisions will depend on incoming economic data, indicating that the direction of Korea's key interest rate remains flexible based on fresh information. Hongji, Arirang News.
Now, President Park Geunhye says the promises made on public employee pension and labour market reforms must be kept to ensure the success of future generations. Meeting with her senior secretaries on Tuesday, the President referred to the upcoming deadlines for her reform plans, stressing that the reforms cannot be carried out without cooperation from Parliament and related parties. She called on officials to meet the deadlines through dialogue and compromise. And for the first time, President Park met with her special advisers that she appointed to strengthen external communication. During a closed-door meeting, the President reportedly asked for their cooperation on the reforms and listened to their recommendations on politics, security and public relations. A study conducted by a local think tank has showed us what many people already knew, that there's a high degree of social conflict here in Korea. The country ranks near the top of related lists against other members of the OECD. The report says deep social divisions in Korea are hampering economic growth and changes need to be made from the government level down. Kwon-soo reports.
Poor communication between the government and the people. The gap between the rich and the poor, disputes among politicians. These are just a few factors causing social conflict in Korea. According to a recent report, the nation's social conflict index was the 5th highest among 24 OECD nations. Only 4 countries found it more difficult to deal with social conflict than Korea, while many more handle it better than Korea, with Sweden having the least problems. Studies reveal the way a country deals with social conflict is reflected in its economic growth. And they stress the importance of cohesion in areas like politics, economy, and social culture. In fact, a 10% reduction in social conflict is said to increase the GDP per person by around 1.4%.
Due to this correlation between social cohesion and economic progress, experts say the government needs to find more effective ways to manage these problems.
Korea's Social Conflict Management Index is among the lowest in the OECD, ranking 27th. But data shows there has been improvement, as back in 2000, Korea was nearly rock bottom and has gradually climbed the ranks. Analysts say, however, there's still a long way to go, especially as people are prone to become more and more sensitive towards conflicts and their own interests as they gain more information on social issues.
The government and public institutions are the main agents of conflict management, but their way of handling problems is too one-sided and authoritative. So conflicts between these bodies and the public are radically expanding.
When asked about the economic impact, Park pointed to a silver lining, saying once conflicts are processed and solved, the economy will actually reap benefits. Kwon-soo, Arirang News.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the latest on Park Taehwan and his suspension from swimming. Now, a lot of people thought he got away easy with an 18-month ban, which meant that he can actually compete in the Rio Summer Games next year, but turns out he might not be off the hook just yet. Now, according to Korean Olympic Committee's regulation on doping, all athletes who test positive shall receive a 3-year ban from their sport. And while initially Park Taehwan was thought to be exempt from this rule, the committee has decided to review this case once again, meaning he may face the 3-year ban after all. If the KOC decides to go with the ban, Park's career would most definitely be over. Now, the Korean national football team hasn't been together since the 2015 Asian Cup, but they're back once again with the March friendlies against Uzbekistan and New Zealand right around the corner. Now, with the national team facing off against Uzbekistan on Thursday, followed by New Zealand on the 31st, the national team members have come together at the National Training Center in preparations for the matches. Now, despite some injury issues, including Kim Jin-soo due to concussion, manager Uli Stülecke has a number of backup ready, meaning Son Heung-min, who initially didn't get the green light from Bayer Leverkusen for the upcoming matches, joined the team either way in order to be on hand for Chaduri's retirement match set for the 31st. And now over to Game 4, the best-of-5 round-of-4 matchup in the KBL between the Ulsan Mobis Phoebus and the Changwon LG Sakers. Now, Mobis one win away from another trip to the championship series, the big game for both teams. Of course, going to the highlights here now, with their backs against the wall, the LG Sakers look like a different team in Game 4 as they outscore Mobis 18-15 in the first quarter before going into halftime with a 33-30 lead. And despite both teams going back and forth in the second half, 5 LG players in double figures in this game as they hang on to force a decisive Game 5 with a 84-79 victory. Now, of course, going to the 2015 LPGA season, all the experts believe that this season would be the season of the rookies, with a number of rookies set to make a splash in the LPGA. And what do you know? So far, it's been true. Now, after Korea's Kim Hyo-joo won the JTBC Founders Cup this past week, she joined Kim Se-young as the 2 rookies to have won an LPGA Tour titles this season. But other rookies have done a great job this season, including Chung Han-ah, who's finished in the top 20 in all their competitions so far. But it's not just the Korean rookies who are dominating the LPGA. Thailand's Arya Junnigar is currently second in the Rookie of the Year race. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. A brief cold will ease this afternoon. Cool and breezy morning is set to become a warm afternoon, getting up to 2 to 3 degrees higher than the average high temperatures. But that also means that we are expecting a big temperature gaps between lows and highs, so dress accordingly to avoid catching a cold. Clear spells and good air quality will continue all day long across the nation, but the air is getting drier each day. Dry weather warning is still in place here in Seoul, and humidity level could go down to as low as mid-teens in the midday, so be cautious of anything that could start a fire and drink water frequently to stay hydrated. On that note, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The daytime high here in Seoul and Busan will top out at 14, while Taehwan and Gwangju rise to 15 and 16 this afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 13 and 15, while Dokdo peaks at 9. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, those are the stories we're following on this Wednesday morning here in Seoul. Korea Today is coming up at the top of the hour, 7 a.m. Korea time. Have a wonderful day and do stay tuned to Arirang. Goodbye.